Show me your driver's license.
For what? You didn't pull me over. We're just sitting here. What do you need my ID for?
Because you want to run your mouth to me.
We were buying food. Suspicious for buying groceries?
You're acting suspicious.
Suspicious how? What crime are you saying happened?
All right, let me paint this picture for you because it starts like one of those moments you never expect to turn into anything. Miguel and Tiana had just finished a regular grocery run after work. Nothing stressful, nothing chaotic. They're loading bags into the back seat, joking around about who forgot the eggs this time. Just a normal couple doing normal things. But then Miguel notices something that doesn't match the mood at all. A marked police SUV is parked a few spaces away, engine off, lights off. But the officer inside? He's not looking at the store entrance, not watching traffic, not talking on the radio. He's staring at their license plate, not for a second either, for a long, uncomfortable moment, writing something on his MDT, looking up, looking back down, and still saying nothing. Miguel tries to brush it off. Tiana even laughs and says, maybe he's bored. But once they get in the car and shut the doors, the weirdness follows them. Miguel starts the engine, checks his mirrors, goes to shift into reverse. That's when the officer suddenly swings his patrol SUV across the aisle and parks directly behind them, blocking the exit. He gets out immediately, walks fast toward the driver's side window, and without greeting, without explanation, without even saying why he's there, he demands, "Show me your driver's license." No lights, no stop, no explanation, just an order that comes out of nowhere. And that's where the story really begins. So the officer walks up on Miguel's window like, this is already a done deal. No, good evening, no, here's why I'm talking to you. Just that hard, flat tone. Show me your driver's license. Miguel looks at him, confused. For what? Miguel asks. You didn't pull me over. What do you need my ID for? The officer's face tightens. You can tell he wasn't expecting pushback. He leans a little closer to the window. Because you want to run your mouth to me. Let that sink in. Not because I saw you do something. Not because we got a call about this. Just, you annoyed me. Inside the car, Tiana is already reaching for her phone. She doesn't yell, she doesn't jump in yet. She just unlocks it and opens the camera, because she knows exactly how fast this kind of thing can flip. Miguel points to the back seat where the grocery bags are piled. We were just shopping, he says. You were staring at my license plate. Why? You're acting suspicious, the officer fires back. Suspicious. The universal word that means everything and nothing at the same time. Miguel actually laughs, but it's that nervous, angry kind of laugh. Suspicious? For buying groceries? Look at the bags in the back. What crime are you claiming happened? And here's the important part. The officer still hasn't named a single law, a single call, a single reason. He's in full uniform, with a patrol SUV blocking them in, demanding ID, but he can't explain what this even is. Traffic stop? Investigation? Random power trip? Tiana finally speaks up. Are we being detained or something? She asks. What's going on? The officer ignores her and turns his attention back to Miguel. License, he repeats. Now. Miguel shakes his head. He keeps his hands on the steering wheel where everyone can see them. Not until you tell me why, he says. What's your name, officer? And that touches a nerve. I'm not getting a supervisor, the officer snaps like he's answering a question nobody asked yet. That right there tells you a lot. Nobody mentions supervisors, but he already knows he doesn't want one. Tiana answers that for him. You're off duty, she says. If you're off duty, why are you stopping people? Because at some point in the back and forth, he did drop that line. I'm off duty, but I'm still a cop. He wanted the authority without the rules. He leans further into the driver's window, close enough that his words hit them with spit. The angle on the phone catches part of his shoulder patch and the side of his face. Because I don't know what you guys are doing, he says. And there it is, not a crime, not a report, just you guys. Miguel stays calm, but you can hear the frustration in his voice now. We're buying food, he says. We walked out of a store with a receipt and bags. You blocked us in with your car, and you still can't say what we did. If this is a legal stop, say what it is. If it's not, we're leaving. The officer's tone gets sharper. You try to leave, you're going to have a problem, he warns. Tiana's voice is quieter, but it cuts through everything. He's not even telling us what this is, she says to the camera. He just jumped out at us. Miguel looks straight at the officer. Call a supervisor, he says. Right now. The officer shakes his head. I told you I'm not getting a supervisor. So instead of doing the one thing that could clear this up, he does something else. He goes back to his patrol SUV, grabs his radio, and calls in backup like they're the threat. From inside the car, you can hear bits of it through Tiana's recording. Phrases like suspicious vehicle and non-compliant and refusing to identify. Notice what's missing. Any actual crime. Tiana turns the camera toward herself for a second. We tried to stay calm, she says quietly. He just keeps pushing. Minutes later, you hear sirens in the distance. A second patrol car is on the way. And this is where the whole thing shifts. Because that next officer, he's the one who's about to decide if this stays an ego trip or gets shut down by the actual law. By the time the second patrol car rolls into the lot, the whole energy has shifted. You've got Miguel and Tiana sitting in a parked car with grocery bags in the back. You've got one uniformed officer who's already escalated this way past normal. And now you've got a new unit pulling up, lights on, trying to figure out what exactly he's walking into. This is Officer Luis Herrera. He steps out of his car, calm, hands visible, scanning everything. He sees the setup right away. One patrol SUV blocking a parked vehicle, no cars crashed, no alarms going off, no one yelling except the first officer who looks way more worked up than the couple. He walks over to Crowley first. They speak a few feet away from the car. You can't hear everything on Tiana's recording, but you catch pieces. Suspicious vehicle. Refuse to identify. Running his mouth, you don't hear words like theft, assault, hit and run. Anything you'd expect in a real situation. Just attitude and vibes. Herrera listens, nods, but his face doesn't match the story. You can tell he's already skeptical. Then he comes to the driver's window, where Tiana is still recording. All right, what's going on, guys? He asks, calm voice. Miguel explains it straight. We were just shopping, he says. We came out, got in the car. He was staring at our plate, then he blocks us in, demands my ID, but he can't say what we did. No lights, no traffic stop. We asked for a supervisor, he refused. Tiana adds, he leaned into the car. He's in my face, spitting while he's talking, getting mad because we're asking questions. He couldn't even tell us what we did. He just jumped out at us. Herrera looks at the grocery bags in the back. He looks at Miguel's hands on the wheel. Then he looks over at Crowley, standing off to the side, arms crossed. You can almost see the decision forming in his head. He turns back to Miguel. Okay, Herrera says, keeping his tone professional. Let me be clear with you. As far as I know, we don't have any reasonable suspicion of a crime. There's no reason for a traffic stop. You're not required to identify yourself. That's it. That's the line that shuts the whole thing down. He just quietly confirms on camera what everyone watching already knows. This isn't about a crime. This is about pride. The camera catches Miguel exhaling, that kind of long breath you let out when you realize you were more scared than you wanted to admit. Thank you, he says, because he made it sound like I had no choice. Tiana keeps the camera on Herrera. We asked for a supervisor, she says. He said he wasn't calling one. Is that normal? Herrera hesitates for half a second. You can tell he's trying not to throw another cop under the bus in public, but he still keeps it honest. You always have the right to request one, he says carefully. And if a stop is happening, there should be a clear reason for it. Translation: no. This is not how it's supposed to go. He looks back at Crowley. Do you need anything else from them? He asks. Crowley doesn't answer. He just shakes his head, frustrated. Herrera turns back to the couple. You're good to go, he says. Sorry about this. And that's it. No ticket, no warning, no, I'll let you off this time. Just, you're good to go, which is basically another way of saying, you shouldn't have been stopped in the first place. They pull out slowly, still recording, and drive home. Later that night, they sit at their kitchen table, replaying the video. You can hear the officer's words clearly. "You're acting suspicious. I'm not getting a supervisor. As far as I know, we don't have any reasonable suspicion of a crime. You're not required to identify yourself." Tiana looks at Miguel. "People need to see this," she says. So she posts it. Clips of the confrontation, the spit, the refusal of a supervisor, and that final line from Herrera basically confirming it was all nonsense. It doesn't explode worldwide, but it doesn't have to. It starts spreading locally. Group chats, neighborhood Facebook groups, TikTok, Instagram reels, people recognize the parking lot. A few even recognize the officer. And within a few days, the video makes it exactly where it needs to go next. To the department. So here's where everything comes back around. Once the video hits the department, it doesn't just quietly sit in someone's inbox. Internal Affairs pulls everything: Tiana's clip, Herrera's body cam, radio logs, and the store's parking lot cameras. They line it all up on a timeline. What they see is simple. Miguel and Tiana walk out with groceries. No incident inside the store. No calls about a crime. Crowley sits in his patrol SUV, runs their plate, then blocks them in. He demands ID because you want to run your mouth. He refuses a supervisor. Herrera arrives and clearly states, "We don't have any reasonable suspicion of a crime. There's no reason for a traffic stop. You're not required to identify yourself." There's no way to spin that into misunderstanding. They call Crowley in for an interview. He leans on all the standard phrases: officer safety, suspicious behavior, non-compliant driver. But every time he says something, they roll the footage back and compare it. There's no aggressive movement from Miguel, no threats, no crime reported. Just a guy asking, "For what? What did we do?" And a woman asking for a supervisor. And then Internal Affairs does something else. They pull his history, prior complaints, a couple of counseling sessions on file, a previous incident note about discourtesy and improper contact while off duty. So now it's not just one bad day, it's a pattern. The recommendation that comes out of IA isn't light. It's not retraining. It's not 3 days unpaid. They send it up the chain with one word at the top: termination. The chief reviews everything. The city attorney looks at it too, because they know if they keep this guy on, that video is going to be Exhibit A in every future complaint. A few weeks after the incident, the department drops a short public statement. No names, no apology, big enough to match what happened. Just a line saying that. An officer involved in an off-duty contact that did not meet department standards is no longer employed with the department. Inside the station, everyone knows exactly who they're talking about. For Crowley, that's the drop. Badge turned in. Gun turned in. Access cut off. He doesn't get walked out in handcuffs, but he does get walked out without a uniform, without a job, and with a video online that shows exactly why. His ego started that parking lot encounter. The camera finished it. After the dust settles, life doesn't magically go back to normal for Miguel and Tiana, but it does get quieter. A few days after the statement goes out, they each get a call from a detective in Internal Affairs, letting them know the investigation is officially closed and appropriate action has been taken. They already know what that means. The officer from the parking lot, gone. For Miguel, it's a weird mix. On one hand, he's relieved. So let's pull this all the way together. You've got a black couple just buying groceries. You've got an officer in full uniform in a real patrol car who decides that staring at their plate, blocking them in, and demanding ID because you want to run your mouth is somehow part of the job. And then you've got the quiet, simple sentence that blows the whole thing up. As far as I know, we don't have any reasonable suspicion of a crime. You're not required to identify yourself. That's the part I really want you to sit with. Because Miguel didn't do anything special, he didn't scream, he didn't swing, he didn't try to be a lawyer. He just asked the most basic questions. For what? What did we do? What crime are you saying happened? Can we get a supervisor? And when that failed, the camera did the rest. Here's the reality. Some people put that badge on and think it's a free pass to act on their feelings instead of the law. And some people put that same badge on and actually follow the law, like Herrera did, right there in that parking lot. So the lesson here isn't that cameras magically fix everything. They don't. But they do something important. They stop people like Crowley from hiding what they really did behind a report and some vague phrases. If Miguel and Tiana hadn't recorded, what do you think the story would have looked like on paper? Suspicious vehicle. Non-compliant driver. Refused to identify. Instead, we have the real version. And in the real version, the wrong person lost their job. If you want more breakdowns of real situations like this, everyday racism, power trips, and people actually getting held accountable, make sure you subscribe, hit the notifications, and stick around, because this stuff isn't rare. It's just finally getting caught on camera.
Hey, that's me. I'm the one who called. My Jeep was parked right here. It's gone.
You Jordan? Turn around for me. Let me see your hands.
Yeah, my name's Jordan Scott Jr. My Jeep got stolen. I just got off work, came down, and it wasn't here, so I called you.
Sure about that? Let me see some ID.
My wallet was in the Jeep. I got a picture of my license on my phone, though. That makes no sense.
So picture this. You're sitting in the back of a Miami squad car, hands cuffed behind your back, sweat sticking to the seat. There's a camera pointed straight at you, and an officer up front is already talking about charges and statements. And all you can keep saying is, I called you. I called you. Why would I call the police if I did it? That's where we're starting today. This is the story of Jordan Scott Jr., a black man in Miami who did what we're always told to do. Call 911 when something's wrong. His car got stolen. He followed the rules. He stayed where dispatch told him to stay. He waited for help. And somehow, the moment the help showed up, he stopped being a victim and became the suspect. Now, I want you to really lock in on that. Because the officers that pulled up on Jordan didn't see a worried car owner. They saw a ready-made hit-and-run driver. They had a wrecked Jeep somewhere nearby, a vague description, and a black man standing outside in a black neighborhood. That was enough. For them, Jordan's not some wild storybook character. He's a regular guy. Early 30s, works long shifts, needs his car to get to work every day. He's got a legal firearm, like a lot of people in Florida. He smokes a little weed sometimes, nothing dramatic, nothing special. On this day, all he wanted was a police report, maybe a tow truck, and a way to figure out how he's getting to work tomorrow. Instead, he ends up handcuffed in the back of a squad car, listening to officers tell him he matches the description of a hit-and-run driver nobody actually saw clearly. And yeah, that's where everything starts to go wrong. Before the handcuffs, before the back seat of the squad car, it's just Jordan walking out of his apartment in Miami after a long day, thinking about food and a shower. He hits the parking lot. The spot where his Jeep should be? Empty. No broken glass. No tow sticker. Just nothing. He stands there for a second, doing that little mental reset we all do, like, maybe I parked on the other side. He checks. Nothing. Checks again. Still nothing. That's when it clicks. The car is gone. So he does what you're supposed to do. He pulls out his phone and calls 911. He's not yelling, not slurring, not all over the place. He's clear. Yeah, my name is Jordan Scott Jr. My Jeep is gone. I parked it right here. I just got off work, came outside, and it's not here. I did not give anybody permission to take it. Dispatch asks the basic questions. Color of the car, plate number, when he last saw it. They tell him to stay put, stay visible, and wait for officers. And that's exactly what he does. Now here's the part they don't tell you in the brochure. While Jordan is waiting like a good citizen, there's already another call-out. A Jeep crashed a few blocks away, hit another car, driver ran off on foot. Witnesses give the classic lazy description. Black male, dark clothes, maybe like 5'8", medium build, no face ID, no name, nothing solid. So when officers Daniels and Jay Collins roll up, they're not just thinking, car theft report. They're thinking, maybe this is our hit and run guy. They pull up, Lights on. Jordan steps forward a little, phone in his hand, trying to wave them down. Hey, that's me. I'm the one who called. Daniels is already sizing him up. Eyes go from his face to his hoodie to his shoes. You Jordan? Yeah, my car. Turn around for me. Let me see your hands. No, good evening. No, tell me what happened first. We're already at command voice. Jordan's confused, but he does it. Hands up, palms out. My Jeep got stolen, man. I just got off work, came down, and it was gone. I called you guys. Jay Collins asks, almost like a script. What were you wearing when you were driving earlier today? Jordan answers, Driving? I wasn't. I've been at work. You sure about that? Jay Collins asks. And right there in that little, you sure about that? You feel it. They're not treating him like someone who lost their car. They're treating him like he's already lying. Daniels asks for ID. Jordan reaches slowly, tells him where his wallet usually is. My wallet was in the Jeep. I got a picture of my license on my phone, though. So your Jeep is gone and your wallet is gone, Daniel says, like he just cracked a case. Convenient. Let that sink in. The man's car is stolen, and somehow that's suspicious. Jordan pulls up the photo of his license. They look at the name, look at him, then look at each other. Daniels goes, You know there was a hit and run with a Jeep that matches this description a few blocks away, right? Jordan answers, Yeah, that's why I called. Someone took my car. How else would it get there? You match the description of the driver, Daniel says. Now remember, nobody actually saw the driver's face. The clothing doesn't quite match. The height's off. But all Daniels needs is blackmail and Jeep, and he's locked in. Jordan tries one more time. Bro, why would I call you if I crashed my own car and ran? That makes no sense. Daniels doesn't even answer that. He just moves to the next step. For my safety and yours, I'm going to detain you while we figure this out. Turn around, hands behind your back. And look, this is the move. They say detain, not arrest, like it's no big deal. But the cuffs feel the same. They pat him down, no weapon on him, nothing in his pockets but keys to his apartment and his phone. Then Jay Collins goes, I smell marijuana, which of course is the magic phrase. That smell suddenly authorizes a lot of things they wanted to do anyway. They start looking around the area where his car used to be. There are shining lights opening his backpack he set by the stairs when he came down. Jordan protests, Yo, that's my bag. I didn't say you could go through that. Relax, Jay Collins says. If you got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about. Inside, they find a small bag of weed and a locked case with his firearm. Legal gun, something he bought after a previous break-in. Paperwork, usually kept in his wallet. He tries to explain, The gun is mine. It's legal. The permit's in my wallet, which was in the Jeep. We'll sort that out at the station, Daniel says. Right now, you're being detained on suspicion of leaving the scene of an accident and filing a false report. False report. For calling about his own stolen car. They guide him to the squad car, duck his head, sit him in the back. The officers don't care. They've already decided what story they're writing. So now Jordan is in the back of the squad car, cuffs on, still trying to process how reporting his stolen car turned into this. Officer Daniels is in the driver's seat typing on the laptop, and Officer Jay Collins is standing outside, door cracked, acting like this is just routine. Jordan Scott Jr. looks straight at Daniels through the cage and says, Officer, my name is Jordan Scott Jr. I called 911 because my Jeep was stolen. I didn't crash anything. I didn't run from anything. Daniels doesn't look back. He just keeps typing and says, Jordan, you're being detained because you match the description of a hit-and-run driver. We'll sort it out at the station. Jordan shakes his head and says, You never saw the driver. You said that. So how do I match? No answer. Just keyboard clicks. They drive him to the station. At booking, a different officer at the desk, Officer Green, reads the list off like it's a grocery order. You're being charged with leaving the scene of an accident, filing a false police report, possession of a firearm, and possession of marijuana. Jordan stares at him and says, "I called you. How is that a false report? My car really is gone." Officer Green shrugs and says, "You can argue that in court, sir." They take his shoelaces, his phone, his watch. He asks about his wallet again. Jordan says, "My wallet was in my Jeep. The officer said he saw it. Where is it?" Green flips through a property sheet and says, "No wallet logged here, just your keys and your phone." So, already, we've got a missing wallet and a list of charges built on a story that doesn't make sense. They put Jordan in a holding cell. It's just concrete, a bench, and time. A lot of time to replay everything in his head. He keeps going back to one line he said outside. Why would I call the police if I did it? And that's the crazy part. That question never gets an answer from any of the officers. Hours later, Jordan finally gets released, on bond and with court dates. It's dark outside now. He steps out of the station with a plastic property bag and no car. He gets home, exhausted, humiliated, and still technically facing criminal charges. Later, Jordan meets with a lawyer and goes over the basics. What he said on the call, what happened when officers showed up, what they claimed he did. The lawyer listens, looks at the timeline, and tells him straight, "Lawyer, you called before they even contacted you. That matters. Their story and your call don't match up. We're going to push back." Meanwhile, a shorter piece of the whole situation starts to leak into public view. Somebody shares that moment in the squad car where Jordan says, "Jordan, in the car, I called you. Why would I call the police if I did it?" That line hits hard because it's simple and it's true. It ends up on social media with a caption calling out how the victim got turned into the suspect. So now, while Jordan is trying to keep his life together and figure out how to fight this in court, strangers online are already debating what happened to him. The department might think it's just another case file, just another arrest. But at this point, it's already more than that. It's a story people are paying attention to. After a while, the case lands on a prosecutor's desk. They have to look at everything together. On one side, the story in the paperwork says, this guy crashed his Jeep, ran away, and then made up a fake stolen car story to cover it. On the other side, the timeline says something else. Jordan called 911 right after he noticed his car was gone. There's no clear ID tying him to the crash. The description they're leaning on is vague and doesn't fully match him. The extra gun and marijuana charges came from a search that started with a very shaky, "you match the description." For a prosecutor, that's a mess. And at some point, they do the calculation and decide it's not worth trying to push this in court. So the word comes down. All charges against Jordan are dropped. No trial, no conviction. On paper, the criminal case is over. But here's what dropping charges doesn't erase. The night he spent in custody. The stress on him and his family. The fact his name was attached to those charges at all. The feeling of knowing he called for help and got treated like a suspect because of who he is and where he lives. On the police side, with the clip circulating and people talking, the department can't completely ignore it. An internal unit starts reviewing the incident. Inside the department, officers involved might get pulled off the street for a while, sat down for interviews, told that policy reviews are underway. Publicly, a spokesperson offers the standard line. Police spokesperson, we're aware of the situation and we're conducting an internal review to determine whether all policies were followed. For Jordan, the decision to drop charges is a win, but it's not justice, because the real damage is bigger than one case file. He's now a man who did exactly what the system told him to do, and found out how fast that system can turn on him. And that's why, instead of just being relieved and walking away, he decides with his civil rights lawyer to take it a step further and file a lawsuit. They're not just talking about a bad night, they're naming it wrongful arrest, unlawful search, and false prosecution. And that's where the story shifts from you're lucky your charges got dropped to no, you're going to answer for what you did. Once the charges are dropped, Jordan should feel free, but it doesn't really feel like that. He meets again with the civil rights attorney. This time, the tone is different. No more panic about the criminal case. Now it's about accountability. The attorney lays it out straight. Attorney, you called to report a stolen car. You were treated like a suspect, searched, arrested, and charged. That is not just a misunderstanding. That's wrongful arrest, unlawful search, and false prosecution. We can sue. Jordan doesn't jump at it for revenge. He's tired. He just doesn't want this to be normal. Jordan, I don't want this happening to somebody else who can't fight it. Let's do it. So they file the lawsuit. It names the city, the department, and the officers involved. It spells out in plain language. He was the victim of a stolen vehicle. He was misidentified and profiled. He was charged without real evidence. At the same time, Jordan slowly starts rebuilding his routine. He went from suspect on their report to plaintiff on his own. All right, let's step back from the details and look at what really happened here. A black man in Miami, Jordan Scott Jr., did exactly what the system tells you to do. His car was stolen. He called 911. He waited where they told him to wait. And because he was a black man in a black neighborhood, standing near the problem instead of running from it, he got flipped from victim to suspect in minutes. That's the core of this story. The officers didn't have a clear ID. They didn't have a solid description. What they did have was a crashed Jeep, a vague black male description, and a black man who was convenient to blame. So they built a case on that, stacked charges, wrote him up like a criminal, and if he didn't have a lawyer, if he didn't push back, if that one line didn't hit people online, why would I call the police if I did it? This could have easily ended as just another quiet guilty plea from somebody who didn't actually do what they were accused of. That's why this matters. Because there are a lot of Jordans out there who don't get the charges dropped, who don't get a civil rights attorney, who don't get a headline or a clip going around social media. So when people say, just cooperate, just do what they say, you'll be fine. This is the counterexample. Jordan cooperated. Jordan followed instructions. Jordan still got arrested. If you want more breakdowns of real situations like this, racism, abuse of power, and people actually fighting back through the system, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and stay tuned. We're not done talking about this.
Sir, I just picked up some money from Western Union.
We got a call about a man out here asking people for money. You been bothering customers?
No, sir. I went in, picked up the money, and came back out. I'm not asking nobody for money. I can show you the receipt if you want.
Man, stop resisting.
All right, let me drop you straight into this one. Antonio Arnello Carter is standing outside a Walgreens in Valdosta, Georgia, talking to police with his hands visible. He's not yelling, he's not running, he's not reaching for anything. He's literally mid-sentence trying to explain himself. He says something like, "Sir, I just picked up some money from Western Union. I got my ID right." And before that sentence even lands, he feels hands grab him from behind. 1 second he's upright, trying to cooperate, trying to stay calm like everybody always tells you to do. The next second his face is bouncing off concrete. His wrist is twisted at an angle it should never be at. And all the air is punched straight out of his chest. All he really knows in that moment is pain, confusion, and a cop's weight pressing him into the pavement, like he's some violent suspect who just attacked someone. And here's the part that should already make you angry. A grown man, doing exactly what he's supposed to, just got slammed into the ground so hard, he ends up with a broken wrist. And he still doesn't even know what he's supposedly done wrong. Let that sink in. Now, let's rewind. Because Antonio didn't wake up that morning planning to get assaulted in a Walgreens parking lot. He's 46. He's got regular life problems like anybody else. Bills, family stuff, trying to keep up. On this day, he's just there to pick up some money through Western Union at Walgreens. That's it. No big plot, no scheme. He gets his money, steps outside, and he's minding his own business. Somewhere else in town, or even nearby, somebody calls the police about a man allegedly panhandling outside the same Walgreens. At pretty much the same time, there's also a notice out about another man who actually does have a warrant. So you've got two separate things going on. A complaint about somebody asking for money, and a completely different person with an active warrant. And then the officers roll up and see Antonio. Middle-aged black man standing outside Walgreens has cash on him because he literally just picked it up inside. They don't know him. They don't know why he's there, but they've got that call in their heads and that warrant in their system. Instead of starting with, okay, let's make sure we've got the right person, it's more like they see a black man in the general area and their brains just connect the dots however they want. Antonio, for his part, is trying to do what he's been taught his whole life. Don't escalate, don't argue, don't give them a reason. He's ready to explain, to answer questions, to show ID. He has no idea that one of these officers is about to skip right past, let's figure this out, and jump straight to take him down. And that's where the whole thing really starts. So we're back in that Walgreens parking lot. Two patrol cars pull in, slow but intentional. You know that we're already assuming something's wrong kind of energy? That's what they bring with them. They see Antonio. He's not bothering anyone. He's just standing there with the cash he picked up from Western Union, maybe checking his phone, maybe just waiting before he leaves. But he fits the easy narrative. Black man near the store has money in his hand. So they walk up like he's already suspicious. One officer goes, "Hey man, what are you doing out here?" Antonio turns, keeps his hands where they can see them. That's the first thing he thinks about. Show your hands, be calm. "I just picked up some money inside," he says. "Western Union. I got my ID if you need it." Now, that right there, that should have slowed everything down. He's not arguing. He's not refusing. He's not trying to walk away. He's offering ID before they even ask. That's cooperation. The officer doubles down. "We got a call about somebody out here asking people for money. You been out here bothering customers?" Antonio shakes his head. "No, sir. I went in, picked up the money, and came back out. I'm not asking anybody for nothing." Another officer hangs back a little, scanning him up and down. That's Officer Billy Keller. He's watching Antonio's hands, his pockets, his body language, like he's waiting for any excuse to decide this is a threat. The first officer asks, "Can I see that ID?" Antonio nods right away. He moves slow, like he's done this dance before. "It's in my wallet," he says. "Back pocket. I'm going to reach for it now, okay?" He literally narrates his own movement for them, again, doing everything that's supposed to keep this kind of situation from going bad. He gets the wallet, pulls out the ID, and hands it over. While they're looking at it, one of them starts asking more questions. "Where are you coming from today? You live around here?" Antonio tells them. Calm, straightforward, no raised voice, no sudden movements. Just a man answering questions because he's trying not to get hurt. They radio in his name, start checking him in the system. Somewhere in that process, they've already mentally tagged him as the guy from the call, or maybe even the guy with the warrant. They don't know that for sure yet, but they're acting like they do. And here's the wild part. Antonio's still trying to help them understand. He holds up part of the money he picked up. "This is from Western Union," he explains. "I can show you the receipt. I just walked out of there, man." He's literally offering proof. He's trying to make their job easier, and then it happens. While he's mid-sentence, somewhere between, "I can show you the receipt," and "I just walked out of there," Keller decides he's done listening. Keller steps in fast, comes up behind Antonio, and grabs him across the upper body. Antonio doesn't even have time to process it. 1 second he's talking, the next his arm is yanked, his balance is gone. Then he's slammed down. His body hits the pavement hard. His wrist gets caught under him at a bad angle when he tries to catch himself. And that's where the break happens. His shoulder takes part of the impact, too. and his face hits the ground. All of that in one move. He's stunned, hearing shouting over him. Stop resisting. Put your hands behind your back. He's already on the ground, already pinned, and they're yelling commands he physically can't follow because one wrist is twisted up, and someone's full weight is on him. And this is where I want you to remember something. He showed them ID. He explained the money. He offered to provide the receipt. He kept his hands visible. He's literally doing everything they tell people to do during a stop, and still gets treated like a threat. While Keller's forcing his arm back to cuff him and grabs his broken wrist, the pain hits him all at once, and he cries out, telling them it hurts, telling them he's not resisting. They don't stop. The cuffs go on tight. His shoulders burning, his face is scraped, and now he's officially in custody without a single clear explanation of what he's supposed to have done. All of this over a panhandling call and a warrant that isn't even about him. And at this point in the story, nobody in that parking lot, not Antonio, not the officers, knows that in a minute they're going to realize they've got the wrong man. So now Antonio's on the ground, face down, cuffs digging into his already broken wrist, shoulders screaming, cheek burning from hitting the pavement. He's trying to pull in air and talk at the same time. I'm not resisting. I'm not resisting, he manages to say. It hurts, man. My wrist. You're hurting me. Keller has a knee pressed into his back, holding him down like Antonio just tried to fight his way out of a robbery. The other officers hovering close, watching, still in that mindset that this is their guy. And here's the thing. Nobody is telling Antonio why this is happening. People nearby stop what they're doing. Someone at a car, somebody walking into Walgreens, they pause and stare. No big crowd speech, no shouting match, just that quiet shock of watching a man who was calm 2 minutes ago, now being bent up on the concrete. Antonio keeps asking, "What did I do? What did I do?" No one answers him in a straight sentence. One of the officers finally throws out a vague line. You know what you did? We got a call on you. Keller keeps holding him down while the first officer steps away for a second, looking at the ID again, listening to the radio. You can feel the energy shift just a little. That, "we're sure this is our guy," starts turning into, "wait a second." Dispatch comes back over the radio with more details on the warrant. They confirm the name, they confirm the description, and that's when the problem starts to show. The officer squints at Antonio's ID, listens again, and you can almost see the realization hit. The information they're getting doesn't match the man they've got on the ground. He asks dispatch to repeat something. Then you get that half-mumbled, "Hold on," under his breath. Meanwhile, Antonio's still in pain, still pinned. "Man, I told you," he says, voice strained. "I just picked up money from Western Union. I ain't done nothing. Check the cameras. Ask the lady inside." He's trying to talk through the pain in his wrist. The first officer finally steps closer to Keller and leans down, low voice. "Hey, this might not be him," he says. Keller doesn't move right away. You can tell he does not want to hear that. "What do you mean?" he snaps back. "The warrant's for somebody else," the other officer says, a little louder this time. He glances at Antonio's ID. Name's not a match. Description's off. They're saying the guy might be somewhere else nearby. So let's pause here. They've taken a cooperative man, slammed him into the ground, injured his wrist, shoulder, and face, cuffed him. And now they're starting to realize they grabbed the wrong person. Antonio hears bits of this. "What you mean, might?" he says from the ground. "You got the wrong man. I told you that. I've been telling you that." There's this awkward silence. Nobody wants to say the words, "We messed up," but everyone feels it. The first officer finally says, "All right, let's get him up." Keller loosens his hold, but it's slow, like he still wants to prove a point. He hauls Antonio up by the arm that's already injured, making him wince hard. "Careful, man. My wrist is messed up," Antonio says. They stand him up on shaky legs. The officer with the ID looks him in the eye now, a lot calmer than a minute ago. "Look, you're not under arrest," he says. "We just had to check some things out." Not under arrest, that's what they're going with. Meanwhile, Antonio's literally standing there in cuffs, hurt, embarrassed, and being told this was just checking some things. He asks again, slower this time. "So why you slam me on the ground like that?" No real answer. Just another vague line. "We got a call, okay? We got a call. We had to make sure everything was safe." Safe for who? Because it definitely wasn't safe for the guy with the broken wrist. Finally, the cuffs come off. "You're good to go," the first officer says. "That's it? No paramedics? No. Do you need medical help? No. We're sorry, we made a mistake. Just, you're good to go." Like they didn't just slam him into the ground and hurt him over someone else's warrant and somebody else's complaint. Antonio looks at them, stunned. "So that's it?" he asks. "You just gonna do that and tell me to go?" One of them mutters, "If you got a problem, you can file a complaint with the city." And that's another classic line. They know most people are too tired, too scared, or too doubtful to even try. That line is not about helping. It's about ending the conversation. And that's where Antonio has to decide what to do next. Walk away and try to forget, or actually push back against a system that expects him to just accept this and move on. After a couple days, once the meds settle in and the shock wears off a little, Antonio starts feeling the second kind of pain, not just in his wrist and shoulder, but in his mind. He can't sleep right. His body tenses up every time he hears sirens or sees a patrol car drive by. Every time he has to use his injured hand and can't, he remembers exactly how he ended up like this. And that "you can file a complaint with the city" line keeps replaying in his head. He decides he's at least going to start with that complaint they mentioned. He contacts the city about what happened. He explains. He mentions his broken wrist, the ER visit, the pain he's still dealing with. The response he gets back is polite, cold, and vague. A form letter. Something along the lines of, "We take all complaints seriously. The incident will be reviewed internally." No acknowledgement that anything went wrong. They want it to sound like they're on it without saying they're on anything. Weeks go by. Nothing meaningful changes. No one from the department calls him to explain. No apology. No, "We're looking into this. Here's what we found." Just silence. And this is usually where the story dies for a lot of people. But Antonio decides to reach out to an attorney who handles police misconduct cases. They file suit against the city, the department, and the officers involved. The claims are serious. Excessive force, violation of Antonio's Fourth Amendment rights, unlawful seizure of his person, and basically treating a cooperative citizen like a violent suspect without cause. This is the part departments hate, because lawsuits mean discovery. Emails, reports, body cam footage, witness statements, all that has to come out. The longer this sits on the table, the more the city has to ask itself a big question. Do they really want this to go all the way through a public trial? Or do they want to write a check and quietly move on? Eventually, they make their choice. They decide to settle. The agreement lands $350,000 to Antonio. Now, let's be real about what that means. On paper, that's the city essentially saying, "We would rather pay this man $350,000 than have a jury look at what we did to him." They don't say the words, "We were wrong," but money at that level is not a "we did nothing and we're just being nice" number. It's them protecting themselves from a worse outcome. Along with that payout, there's another piece that comes out of this mess. The creation of a citizen review board to oversee complaints about police conduct. The city announces it as a step toward transparency, community trust, all the buzzwords. Basically, from now on, when people like Antonio say, "An officer hurt me and no one is listening," there's at least a civilian panel that's supposed to look into those complaints. and not just bury them in a file cabinet at the station. That sounds good on paper. It's better than nothing. But it's also not the magic fix some officials act like it is. Because here's the detail a lot of people miss when they just skim headlines about a settlement and a new board. The officers who did this to Antonio, including the one who slammed him, stay on the force. They weren't fired, they weren't charged, they didn't lose their badges. They just got added to the list of reasons the city had to cut a $350,000 check and set up a review board. So, yeah, Antonio gets compensated. Yeah, there's a new layer of oversight. But the same men who decided a calm, cooperative black man was a fair target for a hard takedown over a complaint and a warrant that didn't match him, they're still out there wearing the uniform, carrying a gun and a badge. And that's the part the narrator in me can't shrug off. The system will hand out money. The system will form boards and committees and hold meetings. But will it really remove the people who keep making the same mistakes that somehow always land on the same kind of bodies? Antonio's case ends up being one of those situations where the city pays, the paperwork grows. The policies get a tweak, but the people who cause the damage keep their jobs. There is some accountability here, but it's not full accountability. It's the halfway version. A check and a committee, not a clean slate. Antonio's case shows how dangerous that mix of bias and power really is. Two different situations, a panhandling complaint and a totally separate warrant, get mentally glued together, and the person who pays the price is the black man standing closest to the story the cops already believe. And yeah, the city paid. $350,000 is not pocket change. They also created a citizen review board, which is better than nothing. It gives people a place to go when they're hurt or mistreated and tired of hearing, "We'll look into it," from the same department that caused the problem. But here's the part you can't ignore. The officers who did this to him, they're still on the job. So let's be honest. This isn't full justice. This is partial accountability. That gap is the problem. Accountability has to be more than a payout, while the same officers keep patrolling like nothing happened. Because if the only ones who truly feel the impact are the victims and the taxpayers, what incentive is there for anything to change at the ground level? So here's what I want you to take from this. If you see stories like this and think, that could never be me, understand that Antonio thought he was just running an errand. If you hear people downplay these incidents, he must have done something. Remember, he walked away with no charges and a six-figure settlement for a reason. And if you ever catch yourself thinking, nothing ever changes, remember at least this much did. A man refused to stay quiet. He got his injuries documented. He pushed the issue with a lawsuit. And now his name is permanently attached to a case that forced his city to pay up and add a layer of oversight it didn't have before. It's not enough, but it's not nothing. All right, I'm going to leave you with this. What does safety really mean if the people who are supposed to protect you can hurt you, admit it with money, and still show up tomorrow in the same uniform? And how many Antonios are out there who didn't have the paper trail, the lawyer, or the chance to fight back? If you want more breakdowns of real situations like this, no exaggeration, no fake drama, just the reality of how power, race, and routine encounters actually play out, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this story. Because the only reason stories like Antonio's don't stay hidden is when people like you refuse to look away.
Ma'am, I need to step inside, now.
Officer, I'm Judge Alana Whitaker. You do not have consent to enter. Do you have a warrant?
This is an investigation. We can do this the easy way.
The easy way is you staying off my threshold without a warrant.
Officer Derek Halverson stood on a quiet Maplewood porch with his shoulders squared and his voice raised, like the badge was a key. He insisted he needed to come inside immediately. He framed it as urgent police business, the kind of urgency meant to make people step aside without thinking. He added pressure in the same breath, consequences, obstruction talk, the usual intimidation moves. The homeowner didn't step back. She stayed calm, held her ground, and did something that made Halverson's confidence flicker for half a second, like he'd just realized the situation wasn't going to follow his script. Then a small detail changed everything. A phone camera light appeared across the street. Another angle followed from farther down. Quietly, without anyone shouting or intervening, the whole scene started getting recorded. Clean, time-stamped, impossible to misremember later. Halverson noticed, and his face changed in a way that told you he wasn't worried about danger inside the house anymore. He was worried about what he'd already done on the porch, because whatever he'd walked up there planning, it suddenly looked like he had picked the worst possible door in Maplewood to try it on. Where are you watching from? Country, state, or city? Drop it in the comments. And if you like story times, where intimidation meets calm boundaries and accountability actually kicks in, hit like and subscribe. Rewind a few minutes. In Maplewood, Halverson had built a reputation people didn't say out loud unless they trusted who was listening. Residents described him as the kind of officer who leaned on fear, especially with black residents, using threats and presence to force compliance first and justify it later. That night, he arrived on a residential street, claiming he was working a narcotics investigation. He treated the urgency like it was evidence. He demanded entry as if paperwork was optional. But the homeowner didn't respond like someone caught off guard. She stayed measured and procedural, refusing to be rushed into surrendering rights. And while Halverson tried different pressure tactics, stepping closer, talking louder, implying consequences, something else was happening around them. The neighborhood was paying attention. Two neighbors recorded from different angles. The homeowner recorded too. No chaos, no crowd, just documentation. And in a moment like that, documentation became the real authority. Halverson could feel it. The porch had turned into a record. Every word, every threat, every step forward was now something that could be reviewed later by people who didn't accept "because I said so" as an explanation. That was when the final piece landed. Something about the homeowner that Halverson clearly hadn't anticipated when he came up the walkway. His posture shifted again, sharper this time. Like a person realizing he wasn't the one putting someone on the spot. He was the one being tested. Halverson tried to recover control the way officers like him usually did, by doubling down. He kept the pressure on, leaning into urgency and authority, acting like the homeowner was the obstacle instead of his lack of legal paperwork. He pushed the idea that refusing him would look bad, that cooperation was the safer choice, that he could make the situation harder if she kept saying no. But the homeowner stayed steady and procedural. She didn't argue feelings. She didn't match his volume. She kept the issue narrow. Without a warrant, he had no legal right to enter. And with each repeated demand from Halverson, the recordings became more valuable. Because intimidation only works when it disappears afterward. Here it wasn't disappearing. Two neighbors kept filming from different angles, and the homeowner's own recording captured his tone and her calm refusal in a clean timeline. That meant if Halverson later tried to rewrite the story, claim consent, claim a threat, claim something in plain view, there would be receipts. That's when Halverson made his first real mistake. He let frustration show. Not a dramatic explosion, just enough to reveal what was underneath the Investigation Act. An officer used to people folding, suddenly facing someone who wouldn't. The mask slipped in a way cameras love. Subtle, clear, and impossible to explain away. Then the turning point hit. The homeowner identified herself clearly as Judge Alana Whitaker, a U.S. federal judge. You could feel the power shift without anyone needing to shout. Halverson didn't suddenly become polite because he respected the law. He recalculated because he understood consequences. A federal judge meant oversight. It meant credibility. It meant his Bodycam footage wouldn't just stay inside a department drawer. It meant his "I felt threatened" shortcut wouldn't land the way it sometimes did. And he knew he was still standing there with no warrant. So he backed down. Not with an apology. Not with accountability in the moment. More like a retreat. Pulling his demands back. Stepping away from the door. ending the confrontation before it became a career-ending clip. He walked off the porch and left. The neighbors kept recording until he was gone, because that's what people did now when they'd seen too much go unchecked. They made sure the ending was captured, too. And that night, the story didn't stay on the street. The footage moved quickly, shared in neighborhood groups, sent to local contacts, forwarded to people who knew how complaints actually got processed. The same night, formal complaints were filed. Not vague ones, specific ones. Timestamps, multiple angles, officer name, narrative consistent across recordings, which meant the department couldn't handle it the old way. They couldn't call it, he said, she said. They couldn't quietly dismiss it as a misunderstanding, because it wasn't just a resident's word this time. It was documented conduct with witnesses and a homeowner whose professional role made the stakes impossible to ignore. By the next morning, the department had a problem it couldn't downplay. This wasn't a messy story with conflicting accounts. It was clean footage from multiple angles, time-stamped, showing an officer claiming urgency, demanding entry without a warrant, and trying to pressure a homeowner into giving up rights. The Bodycam and dispatch logs would either match the story or expose it further. Either way, there was no easy way to bury it. And because the homeowner was a federal judge, the usual slow walk tactics didn't make sense. The complaint wasn't going to get lost. The questions weren't going to be brushed off. The department had to respond like it expected scrutiny, because it did. Internal review started fast. Supervisors pulled Halverson's reports and compared them to what the cameras showed. They checked whether there had actually been a narcotics operation tied to that address. They checked whether he'd been sent there or whether he'd freelanced it. They looked at how he described the encounter afterward, because that's where patterns usually show up. What an officer claimed versus what evidence supported. Then the bigger issue surfaced. Once investigators started digging, the porch incident didn't stay isolated. Complaints that had previously been treated as unproven suddenly looked different when placed next to documented behavior. Stops that residents said felt targeted. Searches residents said felt coerced. Encounters where intimidation did the work that procedure was supposed to do. The review turned from one bad call into repeat behavior. And at that point, the department had two choices: protect the officer and own the scandal, or act like a department that understood liability, trust, and oversight. So Halverson was suspended and put under investigation, not as a symbolic move, but as a necessary one, because the evidence created a risk the department could measure: civil exposure, internal policy violations, and a public record that made "we didn't know" impossible to say with a straight face. For the community, the shift was immediate. People who'd been afraid to complain before saw what documentation could do when it was clear and consistent. The story became a reference point, not gotcha content, but proof that calm boundaries plus recording could stop intimidation before it became something worse. And Judge Whitaker didn't have to give speeches or go on TV to make the point. Her role in the story worked like a spotlight. It showed exactly how an officer behaved when he assumed a resident had no power, and how quickly he changed when he realized the opposite was true. Halverson's career didn't end in that moment on the porch, but it entered a phase it couldn't escape: formal investigation, scrutiny of past conduct, and a real possibility that the badge wouldn't survive what the record revealed. Once the investigation opened, the department's priority wasn't just discipline, it was containment. They had to answer basic questions fast. Why Halverson went to that address, what he claimed he was investigating, and why he tried to push entry without a warrant. With the porch footage already circulating, any gap between his written narrative and what the cameras showed would make things worse. So the review widened. Supervisors and internal affairs pulled prior incidents tied to Halverson, and looked for the same markers people had complained about for years: intimidation language, threats framed as routine, vague justification for stops, and reports that leaned heavily on officer discretion while offering thin facts. That's where the pattern became hard to ignore. It wasn't one misunderstanding. It was repetition. Similar complaints, similar tactics, and similar outcomes. Except this time there was clean documentation and a homeowner with legal authority who couldn't be brushed aside. Community response shifted too. Residents who'd stayed quiet started filing their own complaints, not because they suddenly trusted the system, but because they saw something rare, a moment where evidence forced the system to respond. Some shared dates, badge numbers, and past interactions. Others offered to provide footage they'd kept but never thought would matter. And inside the department, the pressure wasn't just public. It was legal and procedural. A federal judge involved meant the department had to assume oversight would be serious, and that sloppy handling could turn a personnel issue into a much larger problem. Halverson's suspension stopped being the headline and became the beginning, an active investigation that threatened his certification, his position, and the department's credibility if they failed to act. By the end of that week, the message around Maplewood was clear and practical. Intimidation worked best in private, and it fell apart in public. After the suspension hit, the department tried to regain control of the narrative. They issued careful, generic statements about a review and policy compliance, the kind of language meant to calm the public without admitting fault. But the footage made that difficult because people didn't need interpretations anymore. They'd already seen the behavior. And once a department is forced into a review under public pressure, the next battle is always the same, whether it becomes a real investigation or a procedural cleanup. In Halverson's case, it leaned real. Investigators started checking what he had claimed that night against what could be verified: calls, assignments, any documented narcotics operation connected to that address. The wrong house detail became central because it raised an uncomfortable possibility. He hadn't been following a real lead, he'd been following a habit. At the same time, the older complaints gained weight. People who'd been dismissed before now looked credible in hindsight because the porch footage showed a consistent style: forcing urgency, using threats to create compliance, then relying on the fact that most residents didn't have the time, money, or influence to fight back. Judge Whitaker didn't need to campaign against him. Her involvement did something stronger. It removed the department's ability to pretend the issue was unclear. Her calm refusal, the clear recordings, and the fact that she knew exactly what lawful procedure required made the contrast obvious. By the end of the process, Halverson's situation stopped being an officer who made a mistake and became an officer whose pattern finally got documented in a way that couldn't be explained away. And that was the long-term consequence. His career wasn't threatened by one confrontation alone. It was threatened because the confrontation exposed everything behind it. As the investigation moved forward, the story stopped being about one porch confrontation and turned into a department-wide test. Because now Internal Affairs wasn't just looking at what Halverson did that night. They were looking at whether supervisors had ignored warning signs, whether prior complaints had been dismissed too easily, and whether procedure had become something selectively enforced, depending on who was standing on the other side of the badge. That's why the review exposed more than Halverson's behavior. It exposed how predictable his behavior had become. Residents described the same approach over and over: escalation first, paperwork later, pressure to comply, then a report written to justify the pressure. And once those accounts lined up with the porch footage, the department couldn't treat them like isolated grievances anymore. Halverson tried the usual defenses, framing it as misunderstanding, claiming urgency, implying he was acting in good faith. But the recordings limited how far that could go. Multiple angles and clear audio meant the department couldn't interpret away the central issue: He demanded entry without a warrant and used intimidation to try to get it. So the consequences sharpened. His suspension held. The investigation expanded, and with it came the real career threat, findings that could lead to termination, decertification, and potential outside scrutiny if the department's handling looked like a cover-up. Meanwhile, in Maplewood, something changed that departments often underestimate. People started documenting more. Not out of paranoia, but out of pattern recognition. The community had just watched proof do what complaints alone couldn't. The lesson wasn't, everyone is out to get you. The lesson was, if it happens, preserve it. And Judge Whitaker's role became a quiet example of how to handle power. She didn't scream, she didn't chase attention, and she didn't bend. She stayed calm, stayed inside the law, and let evidence carry the weight. That was the lasting impact. Halverson's intimidation only worked when it stayed private. The moment it became public, it started falling apart, piece by piece, complaint by complaint, until the system had no choice but to confront what it had been allowing. By the time the department finished pulling records, Maplewood understood what the porch incident really was. It wasn't a random mistake. It was a moment where a familiar tactic finally met three things intimidation couldn't beat: clear legal boundaries, multiple witnesses, and clean documentation. The department's internal review didn't just focus on that night. It forced leadership to confront what had been tolerated. An officer treating narcotics like a shortcut word, using threats to manufacture cooperation, and relying on the assumption that most people wouldn't be able to fight back. That assumption failed the second the cameras came out. Judge Alana Whitaker didn't win because she was louder. She won because she was precise. She didn't let the encounter drift into emotion or confusion. She kept it about one issue, no warrant, no entry, and let the recordings preserve everything else. And Halverson's retreat told the real truth. He wasn't confident in his legal footing. He was confident in people being too scared to challenge him. Once the footage spread, the complaints didn't feel like whispers anymore. They became a file, a pattern, a risk the department could no longer ignore without exposing itself. His suspension and investigation weren't just about punishing one officer. They were about the department trying to prove it wasn't the kind of place that protected behavior like that. The lesson that stuck with the community was practical, not dramatic. Procedure protects people, and evidence forces systems to act. So here's the question. If you were standing at that door, would you have known your rights well enough to stay calm? And if you were one of the neighbors, would you have recorded quietly, clearly, so the truth couldn't be rewritten later? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that boundaries matter. And subscribe for more story times like this. Grounded, realistic, and focused on accountability.
Hey! Step away from the vehicle now. Hands up where I can see them.
Officer, relax. I'm loading training kits and policy binders
Don't
for
talk.
a community meeting.
Step back. Who authorized you to be in this bay?
I did. I'm Assistant Chief Darnell Price. My credentials are right here. I'm going to hold them steady so you can read them.
That's fake. People flash fake ID.
In the restricted evidence transfer bay behind Raleigh Police Headquarters, Officer Trevor Klein moved fast and loud, like he needed everyone within earshot to understand he was in control. He'd spotted a man at an unmarked department SUV, loading sealed materials into the back. From a distance, Klein decided he was watching a theft in progress. He didn't pause to verify access. He didn't start with procedure. He came in hot. He ordered the man to step away from the vehicle. He closed distance quickly. He used that sharp public tone officers use when they wanted compliance first and questions later. The man didn't flinch. He stayed calm and tried to show credentials. Klein refused to even really look, calling them fake and insisting people tried that move all the time. He treated the badge wallet like a prop and doubled down on the confrontation. And that's when the man asked for one simple thing. Something so reasonable, it should have ended the entire situation in seconds. He directed Klein to radio a supervisor and verify the plate assignment. Klein finally keyed his radio. Dispatch confirmed the SUV was assigned to command staff. The name attached matched the man standing there. That should have been the end. But Klein didn't back off. He kept pushing anyway, as if the verification didn't count, as if reality was negotiable. It wasn't panic anymore. It was ego refusing to lose in front of an audience. Then the evidence transfer bay door opened again. A veteran sergeant walked in, took one look at the man Klein was trying to bully, and froze, because he recognized him instantly. And because the sergeant understood something Klein hadn't fully processed yet. The entire exchange had been captured by a fixed bay camera, and Klein's body cam had been turned on late, but not late enough. The scene stopped being a misunderstanding in a restricted area. It became a documented test of the department's culture, recorded from multiple angles, with no room for creative rewriting later. Where are you watching from? Country, state, or city? Drop it in the comments. And if you like story times where calm professionalism meets accountability and cameras make the truth unavoidable, hit like and subscribe. Rewind. Assistant Chief Darnell Price had been newly appointed. Black, respected, and known for staying steady under pressure, he was on a tight schedule that morning. He had a community meeting coming up, and he needed to load sealed training kits and policy binders, materials meant for that meeting, into his unmarked department SUV. The evidence transfer bay was restricted for a reason. It was controlled space, documented space. It wasn't the kind of place where guesses were supposed to replace verification, but Officer Trevor Klein had been assigned to security for property and evidence transport, one of those routine enforcement roles where a person could either learn discipline and restraint or turn authority into a personal weapon. Klein saw Price from a distance and assumed suspect before he confirmed staff. And once he committed to that assumption publicly, he couldn't accept the fastest off-ramp procedure. So even after dispatch confirmed the plate and the name, Klein kept trying to force the moment to end with him winning. That's what made what happened next so important, because the veteran sergeant who walked in wasn't just a witness. He was the first person in that bay who understood how far this was about to go. The veteran sergeant didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stepped fully into the bay, looked from Klein to the man by the SUV, and the pause said everything. This wasn't some random person near a vehicle. This was Assistant Chief Darnell Price, and Klein was still acting like he had caught a thief. Price stayed calm and let the facts stay in control. He didn't posture, he didn't threaten. He repeated the same point he'd already made. The vehicle assignment had been verified, and the materials he was loading were sealed training kits and policy binders for a community meeting. Klein heard it, but he couldn't accept it, because by then the situation wasn't about safety. It was about Klein refusing to back down in front of witnesses and a camera he'd forgotten existed until it mattered. He tried to justify his behavior as doing his job, even though the job had an obvious procedure: verify before escalating. And the worst part for him was that verification had already happened. Dispatch had confirmed the plate was assigned to command staff, and the name matched. In a normal professional encounter, that's where you reset, apologize, and move on. Klein didn't reset. He kept talking like the confirmation didn't count, like the credentials didn't count, like Price's calm didn't count. The sergeant watched it happen with the kind of expression that came from experience, because he understood the chain reaction this creates inside a department. Then the sergeant did what Klein should have done first. He took control of the scene with procedure. He directed Klein to stand down. He addressed Price respectfully. He asked one more time for the basic verification points. Not because he doubted Price, but because he was building a clean, professional record on the spot. And Price gave it quietly, clearly. Now the situation had 3 layers of proof: the restricted bay's fixed camera, Klein's body cam, late but active during the crucial minutes, and the radio dispatch log confirming the plate and assignment. Klein had no room left to claim confusion. What he had left was attitude. And that attitude, captured in a restricted area with oversight cameras, turned this from a mistake into a question people inside the building couldn't dodge. How did an officer feel comfortable treating someone like this after verification? That's where the culture issue surfaced. Because this wasn't just Klein being jumpy. This was a young officer in a control-oriented assignment, treating enforcement like confrontation, assuming suspect first, dismissing credentials, and then refusing to accept confirmed facts. The sergeant didn't debate him. He didn't lecture on the spot. He did the thing that makes accountability real in modern policing. He ensured the footage and the reports would reach the people who couldn't ignore them. Price didn't demand special treatment. He didn't need to. The evidence did the demanding. By the time Price left the bay to head to the community meeting, the incident was already bigger than the two of them. Not because anyone had posted it online yet, because inside that building, the right people now knew there was a recorded confrontation involving command staff that never should have happened in the first place. And if it could happen to a man with credentials, access, and authority, everyone understood what that implied for people who had none. Once Price left for the community meeting, the department moved into damage control mode, but not the public kind, the internal kind. Because this wasn't a complaint from a stranger, it was a recorded confrontation in a restricted bay involving command staff, verified dispatch information, and an officer who still refused to stand down. That meant supervisors couldn't minimize it without implicating themselves. Internal affairs locked down the footage quickly. The fixed bay camera was secured. Klein's body cam was pulled and flagged. Radio traffic and dispatch logs were preserved. The goal was simple. No editing, no missing files, no convenient gaps. And as soon as the clips were reviewed together, the story changed shape. It wasn't just that Klein approached aggressively. It was that he dismissed credentials, got verification, and still kept pressing, like facts were optional if they conflicted with his assumption. That's the point where it stops looking like a training issue and starts looking like a culture issue. So investigators did what they always do when a clean incident exposes a bigger problem. They pulled history. They reviewed prior complaints tied to Klein's assignment area. They looked at how evidence bay officers were trained, what they were told to do before escalating, who supervised them, what verify first actually meant in practice. They checked whether similar confrontations had been written off as routine enforcement because the targets didn't have rank, connections, or credibility inside the building. And more things started lining up. Not necessarily identical incidents, but the same pattern. Aggressive approach, fast suspicion, refusal to accept explanations, and reports that framed confrontation as good police work. The evidence bay role, which should have been about careful procedure, had become a place where certain personalities could turn authority into harassment. That's why leadership couldn't treat it as one bad moment. The problem wasn't only what Klein did, it was how easy it had been for him to do it, confidently, publicly, in a restricted space, while cameras rolled. Klein was suspended. Then the termination process began. The department couldn't keep him in that role, and after the footage, they couldn't keep him in the department without inviting a bigger fight. But Price didn't stop at discipline. He pushed for changes that made it harder for the next Klein to do the same thing. Mandatory verification steps before any enforcement action in restricted areas. Clear supervision requirements for evidence bay officers. Documentation standards that couldn't be optional. And critically, public reporting of profiling complaints so the department couldn't pretend patterns didn't exist until they were caught on camera. On the city side, a civil rights claim followed, and the city settled, because the documentation made denial expensive. And that's where the story landed for everyone watching inside and outside the department. If an assistant chief with credentials, plate verification, and command authority could still be treated like a suspect, what happened to regular citizens who had none of that protection? What made the fallout different wasn't just that Klein got suspended and fired. It was what the footage forced everyone to admit out loud. Verification had worked, and he ignored it anyway. So Price treated it like a leadership problem, not a personal insult. He didn't chase revenge. He pushed the department to close the exact gaps Klein had used. Because if those gaps stayed open, the next incident would happen to someone without rank, and it would be easier to bury. The new rules were simple and hard to argue with. In restricted areas like the evidence transfer bay, officers had to complete mandatory verification steps before any enforcement action: plate check, access confirmation, supervisor notification. Evidence-based security could no longer operate like a solo power zone. Supervision rules tightened, so a young officer couldn't escalate unchecked. Profiling complaints and outcomes had to be tracked and publicly reported, so patterns couldn't be dismissed as isolated. The city settled the civil rights claim because the documentation made the risk obvious. But the settlement wasn't the real weight of the story. The real weight was what it proved. This happened to command staff with credentials, access, and verification on record. So the question that hung over Raleigh afterward, and the one Price didn't let anyone dodge, was the same one that hit the community immediately. If it could happen to him, what happened to people with no badge wallet, no title, and no one inside the building who recognized their face? Once the policy changes were announced, the department tried to frame the incident as a one-off that had been handled. But inside the building, people knew better because the footage didn't show confusion. It showed a refusal to accept verification. That's why the reforms mattered. They weren't cosmetic. They were designed to remove the exact moments where bias and ego could hide behind "I thought" or "I felt." Price also made sure the message internally was just as clear as the policy externally. Restricted areas were not places for improvisation. The job was procedure. If an officer couldn't follow verification steps, they didn't belong in that assignment. For the public, the case became a reference point, not because it was dramatic, but because it was clean. A calm command staff member, a young officer escalating, dispatch confirming the truth, the officer still refusing to back down, cameras capturing the whole sequence. The city settlement closed the legal chapter, but it didn't erase the question the footage left behind. If someone at Price's level could be treated like that even with credentials and confirmed plate assignment, then the protection regular residents assumed existed was thinner than they wanted to believe. And that's where the story ends, right on that uncomfortable truth. Accountability didn't happen because the system was naturally fair. It happened because the system was forced to face evidence. So, what would you have done in that bay if you were Price, calm but being pushed? And what would you do as a witness, knowing a camera can be the difference between a claim and a fact? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more story times like this, grounded, realistic, and focused on accountability, make sure you subscribe.